Good evening and welcome to our public workshop for the 2023 plan for the 2012 annual PM2.5 standard. The meeting is being held in person and telecast between our Fresno, Modesto, and Bakersfield offices and via Zoom. My name is Emily Nealand, Program Manager of the Planning Group here at the district. And I'm also joined by John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, Patrick Houlihan, Supervising Air Quality Specialist, Molly Boyette, Air Quality Specialist, Sylvia Vanderspeck, Chief of Air Quality Planning at the California Air Resources Board. And we're also joined by Laura Carr from CARB on Zoom, as well as a number of CARB staff to assist with questions. We'll do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation in person and via Zoom. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your other communication devices, such as your cell phone. During the meeting, all public participants on Zoom will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. If you'd like to provide public comment during the comment period of this workshop, please step up to the podium in person if you'd like to speak. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. And if you'd like to speak on Zoom, you can raise your hand. You can also submit comments or questions via the Q&A function on Zoom, which will be addressed after the verbal public comment period. You can also submit comments or questions to webcast@valleyair.org throughout the meeting, as we'll be monitoring that inbox. If you're presenting or providing a public comment, please state your name and affiliation and speak slowly to allow for smooth translation. At this time, our translators will share instructions on how to access the translation services.
Buenas tardes, yo soy Cristina y tenemos a Emilia en Zoom también interpretando esta tarde. ¿Cómo escuchar la interpretación en español? Si están usando una computadora, en los controles de la reunión o el seminario web, seleccione el icono de interpretación que aparece a un mundo en la parte debajo de la pantalla y después seleccione español y silencie el audio original. Si está usando un teléfono o tableta, seleccione los 3 puntos para ver más opciones, seleccione interpretación y siga las mismas instrucciones de arriba. Para hacer una pregunta o comentario, seleccione el icono de reacciones para levantar su mano y también puede mandar pregunta al correo electrónico que se vio en la pantalla. Gracias.
Thank you. So now to get into our presentation, the purpose of our workshop today is to provide you with an update on our recent developments with regards to the development of our PM2.5 plan for the 2012 annual PM2.5 standard. In particular, today we'll be discussing the base year emissions inventory, our precursor demonstration, and our best available control measure analysis for both the district and the California Air Resources Board. By way of the brief background, EPA established the 2012 annual PM2.5 standard on January 15th of 2013, which was set at a level of 12 micrograms per meter cubed. The district was originally designated as moderate non-attainment for the standard in 2015. Subsequently, we submitted our 2016 PM2.5 plan, which included a request to be reclassified to serious non-attainment. EPA approved our moderate plan effective December 2021, and a serious plan based on that action is due to EPA December 31st of this year. EPA proposed full approval originally of our original plan that we submitted to address the serious requirements in December of 2021, and subsequently reversed their decision in October of 2022 and proposed disapproval of those portions of our plan. So in response to this EPA reversal, we did withdraw our plan in concurrence with CARB in October of 2022. So based on this, we're currently developing our updated plan, which will rely on the analyses and strategy from the 2018 PM2.5 plan, and also build on those strategies to go beyond. So as you know, the Valley's air quality challenges are unmatched in comparison to other regions in meeting the air quality standards, particularly because of our topography and meteorology, which often places a bowl over the valley. And we're also an area with major goods movement. We also have high population growth, pollution from other areas that transports into the valley, wildfires, and drought. Because of these conditions, we require to go beyond in comparison to other regions in order to meet our clean air targets. The district strives to protect the health of Valley residents through our efforts to meet health-based and state federal ambient air quality standards with the collaboration with the California Air Resources Board. This plan will demonstrate the district and CARB's continued and ongoing efforts to improve air quality in the Valley through a comprehensive attainment strategy, and it will be developed through a public process. We'll also be planning to include a health benefit analysis of our plan strategy, which will quantify the health benefits of the measures that we plan to include. This plan will be building off of previous attainment plans that the district and CARB have developed, including our plans for both PM2.5 and ozone, which include the precursors of both NOx and PM2.5 that form PM2.5. So with that, I'll pass it over to Patrick Houlihan to give a little bit more background.
Thank you, Emily. Patrick Houlihan here. I'll continue us on our workshop journey. There's been tremendous success in reducing NOx emissions since 1980. That has been accomplished through regulatory actions, CARB adopting mobile source emission controls, and strong incentive programs that have combined 5.7 billion public-private investment collaboration. However, this success also highlights the challenges ahead, as the Valley has many standards still to attain, and the ability to reduce emissions even further becomes more and more difficult, especially in light of the fact that the district only has regulatory authority over the yellow and blue portions of the graph. The district has adopted many rules in the recent years to squeeze further reductions of not only direct PM2.5, but also from the predominant precursor, that is NOx as well. Let's focus on the maps to the left. This is for PM2.5 averaged over a 24-hour time period from 2003 through 2020. Actual monitor data shows the drastic reductions. And likewise for the maps on the right, as those are for PM2.5 averaged over a year's time period. Both portions of this slide show the monitoring sites the district has up and down the valley. If you look at the upper portion, this is data for last year, the year 2022. You can see that more than half of the monitors are recording emissions below the 2012 standard already, and the majority of the sites are below the 1997 standard. The bottom portion of the slide is for our 3-year design value. And again, it shows a majority of locations below the 1997 standard and almost half below the 2012 standard. The Clean Air Act and EPA's 2016 PM2.5 implementation rule requires certain components to comprise an attainment plan. The bulk of this workshop is to discuss the elements of the precursor demonstration, the emissions inventory, and the backup analysis. I will now turn the presentation over to Laura Carr of the California Air Resources Board to continue.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm Laura Carr. I'm an air pollution specialist in the Air Quality Planning and Science Division at CARB, and I'll be discussing 3 SIP elements prepared by CARB: the base year emissions inventory, the precursor demonstration, and the best available control measure analysis. So first, the emissions inventory for the base year of the SIP, which is 2017. An emissions inventory is a comprehensive estimate of air pollutant emissions by source for a specific geographic area during a given time period. Emissions inventories are used in the SIP to identify pollutants of concern and their sources, to determine the amount, distribution, and trends of pollutants as an input to air quality modeling, to identify and track control strategies, and also as an input to health risk assessment. So on this slide here, we can see that we're showing sources of emissions that are considered either point or area-wide sources. Point sources include refineries, manufacturing, electric utilities, oil and gas production, food processing, and chemical production. Estimates for emissions from point sources to be included in the inventory are submitted to CARB by the local air district. Sources of area-wide emissions include farming activities, dust from paved and unpaved roads, solvents, consumer products, and open burning. Methodologies to estimate emissions from area-wide sources are shared by CARB and districts. Next slide, please. Mobile sources of emissions are also included in the inventory. These include both off-road and on-road mobile sources. Off-road mobile sources of emissions come from many different industries, each with unique operations. Sources include cargo handling equipment, construction equipment, agricultural equipment, locomotives, and lawn and garden equipment, among others pictured here. For off-road mobile source categories, CARB estimates emissions from these sources using a suite of category-specific models. On-road mobile sources of emissions include passenger vehicles and motorcycles, heavy-duty trucks, and buses. And for the on-road mobile source categories, CARB estimates the emissions from these sources using the MFAC model. Next slide, please. Emissions from all of these sources, stationary, area, and mobile, are reflected in the emissions inventory. The base year for the 12 microgram PM2.5 SIP being developed for the San Joaquin Valley is 2017. So shown here is the 2017 anthropogenic emission inventory for the valley in tons of emissions per day on an annual average basis for NOx, which, as was mentioned, is a significant precursor to PM2.5 formation, and directly emitted PM2.5. In 2017, emissions of NOx were 228 tons per day, and emissions of PM2.5 were 69 tons per day. The left pie chart shows that the majority of NOx emissions came from mobile sources, 47% from on-road and 38% from off-road sources. Stationary sources accounted for 10% of the NOx inventory, and area-wide sources accounted for 5%. And then in the right-hand pie chart, we can see that the majority of PM2.5 emissions came from area-wide sources at 74%. On-road mobile sources contributed 6%, and off-road mobile sources contributed 8% of PM2.5 emissions. And lastly, stationary sources accounted for 12%. Next slide, please. All right, next I'll discuss the precursor demonstration. And moving on to the next slide. The purpose of a precursor analysis is to determine which components of PM2.5, which precursors to PM2.5 formation, need to be controlled via the SIP in order to reduce PM2.5 levels. PM2.5 is made up of many constituent particles that are either directly emitted, such as soot and dust, or formed through complex reactions of gases in the atmosphere. NOx, SOx, and VOCs, and ammonia are all gases that are precursors to PM2.5, transforming into particles through physical and chemical atmospheric processes. EPA identifies the 4 precursors that must be evaluated for potential control measures. EPA says that states can also submit an optional precursor demonstration designed to show that for a specific PM2.5 non-attainment area, emissions of a particular precursor from sources within the non-attainment area do not or would not contribute significantly to PM2.5 levels that exceed the air quality standard. If that demonstration is approved by EPA, the SIP does not need to include controls for that precursor. EPA guidance describes an analytical process to perform the precursor demonstration involving multiple levels of analysis to understand the air quality impact of reductions of emissions of these precursors, and also consideration of additional information. The guidance recommends modeling changes in precursor emissions to assess the impact on PM2.5 air quality. The guidance recommends modeling a 30% reduction and a 70% reduction in emissions for this analysis. CARB performed the precursor analysis, including modeling 30% and 70% emission reductions for ammonia, SOx, and VOCs or ROG to determine if the SIP needs to include controls for those precursors. For ammonia specifically, the precursor analysis includes an extensive control analysis that documents that a 30% reduction in emissions is an upper bound of the feasible reductions. And in fact, it shows that only a 2% reduction is feasible from potential ammonia control measures. Next slide, please. This slide shows the preliminary results of the modeled sensitivity analysis that CARB performed based on a 30% reduction in anthropogenic emissions in the San Joaquin Valley in 2030. The analysis involves comparing the modeled impact on PM2.5 levels from a 30% decrease in PM2.5, NOx, ammonia, ROG, and SOx emissions to thresholds for annual PM2.5. So if the calculated PM2.5 impact is greater than 0.2 micrograms, then PM2.5 levels are sensitive to the modeled percent reduction in emissions. In the left two maps for PM2.5 and NOx, we can see that all of the valley monitoring sites had a modeled PM2.5 impact greater than the 0.2 microgram threshold. And PM2.5 and NOx are, of course, significant precursors in the valley, and they will be included in the control strategy in the SIP. And then if you click one more time, this is just a highlight in the remaining three maps for ammonia or NH3, as it's shown on the slide, ROG and SOx, we can see that all valley monitoring sites had a modeled impact less than the 0.2 microgram threshold. This means that PM2.5 formation is not sensitive to a 30% reduction in emissions of these precursors. Since the analysis shows that ammonia, ROG, and SOx are not significant precursors, controls for those precursors will not be included in the SIP. Next slide, please. All right, lastly, I'll discuss CARB's most stringent measure and best available control measure analysis. Next slide, please. The level of stringency required for the proposed SIP for the 12 microgram PM2.5 standard is known as most stringent measures, or MSM. This is a level of stringency that exceeds both reasonably available control measures, or RACM, and also best available control measures, known as BACM. In other words, MSM is inclusive of BACM requirements and then goes beyond that analysis in terms of stringency. In the analysis I'm discussing today, this covers CARB measures, specifically mobile sources, and also residential and commercial space and heating appliances. It looks at control measures currently being implemented by CARB compared to those in other jurisdictions or states or non-attainment areas. And it also includes a discussion of potential measures from public measure suggestions gathered through the public process for this SIP and for the 2022 state SIP strategy. It assesses this range of potential measures for stringency and feasibility to ensure the measures meet the MSM requirements that EPA established. CARB has previously demonstrated and EPA has approved our mobile source program as MSM. Most recently, this was included in the San Joaquin Valley 2018 PM2.5 plan, which EPA found to meet the requirements of MSM. CARB's analysis on mobile sources complements the district's analysis, which covers stationary sources. Next slide, please. Before discussing the preliminary conclusions from the analysis, I want to discuss California's authority under the Clean Air Act to set engine standards that are more stringent than federal requirements. California is in a unique position. Other states can either adopt California standards or federal standards, but they cannot set emission standards on their own. This unique authority exists for California because CARB's regulatory actions to control emissions from motor vehicles predate the existence of the Federal Clean Air Act and US EPA. And over the years, we've continued to adopt increasingly stringent regulatory actions to control emissions from new vehicles, trucks, off-road equipment, and also the fuels that power them. Because other states are not in the same position, it often means that CARB's level of stringency of control measures is de facto MSM. Next slide, please. As a preliminary conclusion to this analysis, we found that CARB's control programs for each source category analyzed meet BACM and MSM requirements. The categories are shown on this slide and include on-road light duty, on-road medium and heavy duty, and off-road. And we also discussed the commitment that we made in the 2022 state SIP strategy for the zero emission space and water heater standard, which we find to be the most stringent measure of its kind in any state. Next slide, please. That concludes the CARB portion of the presentation. CARB welcomes feedback on the SIP elements discussed either today during the workshop, or you can also email comments to the address shown on the slide here, sipplanning@arb.ca.gov. Thank you. We look forward to the feedback, and now I'll hand it back over to the district.
Thank you, Laura. So the district's BACM analysis conducted parallel with CARB's addresses the plan requirements that the plan must provide for implementation of all BACM, including best available control technologies for control of PM2.5, no later than 4 years after reclassification to serious non-attainment. As the district was reclassified to serious non-attainment in 2021, we must implement BACM no later than 2025. Through this evaluation, the district conducted robust analyses for all PM2.5 and NOx rules for stationary and area sources. It ensures implementation of the maximum degree of emissions reductions achievable by 2025, considering technological and economic feasibility. Notably, EPA has previously approved that district measures meet BACM as well as MSM. The figure to the right shows the district steps in the BACM evaluation, starting with identifying rules for their applicability, requirements, and emissions inventory, then reviewing state and federal regulations and other suggested guidance, then comparison to analogous rules from other regions, and then evaluating all potential further controls for their technological and economical feasibility, and then we present our evaluation findings. So to begin, the district has identified a number of rules shown on the next 3 slides, controlling PM and NOx for stationary and area sources, including industrial facilities, oil and gas production, various types of equipment, agricultural sources, other commercial facilities and residential sources, as well as Regulation 8 rules controlling fugitive PM emissions, for a total of 31 rules evaluated. Then the district reviewed state and federal regulations in comparison to these rules. Federal regulations include control techniques guidelines, alternative control techniques, and new source performance standards. And state regulations include the California Health and Safety Code requirements, as well as CARB's airborne toxic control measures. Then the district reviews rules from other regions across the nation and in California, including but not limited to Bay Area, South Coast, Sacramento Metropolitan, and Ventura County Air Districts. The district carefully reviews the differences between rules with a focus on requirements as a whole, acknowledging the differences in regional situations. Then all potential BACM identified through this process is thoroughly evaluated using the key factors identified in EPA's 2016 PM2.5 implementation rule to determine if these potential opportunities qualify as BACM for the Valley. Then any further controls identified are evaluated for their technological and economic feasibility. The technological feasibility analysis determines if a potential opportunity to reduce emissions as BACM is viable for existing facilities and operators in the Valley, given operating needs and restrictions. This includes a review of district permits, environmental and technological studies, EPA and CARB guideline documents, and other air districts rules, regulations, and guidelines. The analysis for economic feasibility includes a cost-effectiveness analysis conducted to evaluate the economic reasonableness of an air pollution control measure or technology as it applies to affected entities and residents in the valley. This cost-effective analysis examines added cost in dollars per year of control technology or techniques divided by the emissions reductions achieved in tons per year. And finally, through this evaluation, the district considered all potential measures, including emission reduction opportunities identified or considered in previously adopted district plans that were determined to be infeasible at the time, as well as new emission reduction opportunities adopted in other areas. The evaluation concludes that the district and CARB rules implement VACUM as supported by EPA's recent determination that district regulations are MSM. The district will continue to work with CARB to evaluate additional emission reduction opportunities for the attainment strategy for this plan, including an updated MSM evaluation. And in summary, the initial SIP requirements that are addressed are the emissions inventory, for which the district and CARB developed a comprehensive, accurate, and current inventory of actual emissions of relevant pollutants in the valley. The precursor demonstration, for which modeling demonstrates SOx, ROG, ammonia do not contribute significantly to PM2.5 exceedances in the valley. And the VACUM analysis, which demonstrates that the district and CARB are implementing VACUM for the control of direct PM2.5 and NOx no later than 2025 as required. The requirements for major sources have been addressed through recent revisions to District Rule 2201, which is the modified stationary source review rule in April 2023. The district has published initial draft sections for public review that include a precursor demonstration and emissions inventory. These are available on the webpage for public workshops and hearings, as well as the 2023 PM2.5 plan webpage. We are requesting public comment on these sections by September 28th. And then the district will conduct ongoing public engagement to continue the plan development through 2023, including additional public workshops on the plan elements and attainment strategy. And we'll provide ongoing updates to the district governing board, citizens advisory committee, and environmental justice advisory group. And draft plan chapters will be published for public review in the coming months. That concludes our slides. My contact information is on this slide if you have any comments or questions. And if you would like to sign up for the district PM Plans listserv to receive any email updates on plan development, that link is here on this slide. I will now pass it back to Emily for public comment and questions.
Thank you, Molly. Any Q&A on Zoom? We have no indication of public comment in person. Do we have any public comment in Modesto or Bakersfield?
No public comment in Modesto.
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. And now I'll pass it over. We do have one public comment here in person.
My name is Manuel Cunha, president of Nisei Farmers Lake, and I don't have COVID. I just have a bad cold. So I went to my doctor to make sure so I wouldn't get yelled at. So it's just a cold. But the questions I have, maybe John, you can answer, or maybe one of the staff. Are we receiving the credit for those areas that are non-controllable, such as burning? The amount of force that went up in flames over the past 5 years has been astronomical. Have we been given credit for that situation? And that's a question I have. I see the report on page PM2.5. I think it's 5. Yes. And I don't hear much coming even from, and maybe CARB can answer as well, because they're probably still on the line. Where are we with, that's my first question. Okay, where are we at with that? And is there a time limit right now? Am I on a time limit of 3 minutes? Okay, if not, I'll go back and sit down and come back. I'll figure a way out. But what's the answer, or is there?
Hello, this is Sylvia Vandersbeck. I'm Chief of the Air Quality Planning Branch at the California Air Resources Board. And as you mentioned, there's been numerous amounts of wildfires over the past couple of years. And so as far as when we do our, are doing the modeling attainment demonstration, including the precursor analysis, we are allowed to take out those days and not have them count against us, the wildfire days. And so while it's not documented right here in what's present on the district's website, as we're pulling the modeling attainment demonstration and stuff, the documentation for all of those days will be included. But we, yes, they are not being counted against us.
If it's 70, 80 days, whatever it is, that'll be pulled out each of those years, and we won't be penalized for those then.
That's right, yes. I don't know exactly how many days there are, but we're definitely working with EPA to make sure that we could take those days out. Okay.
The second question, somehow, John, I'm picking on you. I don't know why. But the issue you talk about, sources that the district, have no control over, where the control becomes EPA/ARB. And that is the goods movement of goods from Los Angeles through the San Joaquin Valley to Seattle, Washington, or Oregon, or whatever the route may be, or even not going up 101, but coming down the 99 or the I-5. That's in our basin. Those emissions for trucks and goods movement, we have to have the goods movement. I mean, it's just. And the second part of that question then is rail. We have a huge rail movement when it gets to Bakersfield, and it goes through the turnpike. It takes forever, we know that. Again, movement of containers and goods and everything, we just have to. Where are we with that in relationship to the emissions from vehicles / that this district has no control, but ARB does?
Yeah, thanks, Manuel. This is John Klassen with San Joaquin Valley. That's definitely a big part of the strategy for this plan, just like with all past ozone plans, PM2.5 plans, to look at not only stationary sources and area sources, but mobile sources has to be a part of that strategy, with it being the largest piece of emissions for NOx. And so I'll let Sylvia say a bit about the state sub-strategy of what they're planning in the coming years to continue to get those emissions reductions from transportation. But I'll say that we've also been advocating with the federal government to get emissions reductions from locomotives that they have control over, and international trucks that they can control nationally. So we're continuing to push on that to try to achieve those reductions from the federal sources. And I'll let Sylvia say a bit about the state strategy.
Yeah, thank you. This is Sylvia Vandersbeck, California Air Resources Board. So I do want to highlight, that we have been pushing the federal government for quite some time to do stuff on heavy duty trucks and on locomotives. For heavy duty trucks, they finally adopted the clean truck standard, and CARB has also adopted a low NOx truck standard. So we are moving to clean up the truck fleet. In addition, we've started, putting out, we have measures and regulations requiring zero emission in the heavy duty truck sector and the light duty truck sector, and we're starting to move forward that. We understand that is a challenge, but it is our plan to control our sources as much as we can. On the locomotives, just this year we adopted a locomotive measure, realizing that the federal government was moving very, very slowly on that. So we're definitely pushing the envelope, trying to clean up all the more, some of the federally recognized sectors here in California.
Okay, being both of you stated those comments, the infrastructure for zero trucks is not here. We've had several meetings with your agency and the PUC and PG&E. There ain't enough substations, there ain't enough electrical charges to alone work for the cars, but to deal with trucks that require a tremendous amount of power. And yet we have a deadline, I believe, of 2030. That's your goal, is to have all zero, or at least a portion of zero trucks. Right now, I don't see how that's possible and even feasible. When interstate commerce, that I'm going to have to take my product to the border, to the Oregon border, to wherever, and drop off, because the trucks won't be able to come in here to get the product, because they're going to have a zero truck emission standard. It's not possible. Right now you have, and I respect this, is I haven't seen any charging truck stations for zero emission trucks. And when I hear it's only 300 miles, and I hear the issues that are confronting them, and last week when I read and heard that the zero truck is going to stay at 80,000 pounds plus 3,000 pounds of battery on top, that the question became overpasses. Will those vehicles be able to sustain? Will they be able to stay on a freeway that has a structure that you drive on, like an overpass, but for lengths of distance? When you have all these trucks now with that extra amount of weight, that the structure isn't designed for that, okay? So the question was, okay, how do we get our goods out of here? People have to eat. Companies will tell us, we won't buy from California anymore. You've just destroyed Mendota, Tranquility, Orosi, Gonzales, King City. You've destroyed all those little rural communities, because that's the product where the people live and work. So when I look at the truck example of emissions that you're proposing, I think it's incredible. But it's not in no way, shape, or physically. We've asked for incentive funding to help to deal with this. Nothing against CARB. Your loan program, if I had to rate it, it would fall into the F category. It is the most unfriendly, the most unworkable program there ever is. If I was to rate the Air District in their incentive program on everything you've done, I would have to give it a AA, okay? I don't hear too many bad discussions, okay, of cooperation, collaboration. But how are we going to do this? And if you notice, I said, how are we going to do this? When the electrical systems are going to have to be so powerful to handle those trucks. And I believe the number is 16 million trucks in this state annually, average through the San Joaquin Valley. I'm hearing 1.6 million trucks a day, 99 in the I-5 corridor. I don't know that, because I have a letter to one of my growers that we submitted to the PUC and to your chairman of ARB. PG&E told them that if they wanted to build their packing house in the community of Sanger, jobs, great jobs, good paying jobs, that they may want to think about, because it may be 10 years before the substation can handle that facility. 10 years. And I read that you folks are trying to propose a 3 to 5 year of electrification. And this isn't for some equipment. So my concern is we're going to use trucks and rails, but you're going to use trucks as one of those major sources to reduce emissions. Is it at the cost? Is it at the cost of all the rural community jobs? I can care less about Los Angeles. I can care less about San Francisco. But I do care one heck of a lot of what I do to Mendota, what I do to Fireball, and those jobs. Just like this water crisis we have. We don't have a water crisis now, but we do, because we're dumping it into the ocean and we don't have a place to put it. So that is my biggest concern, because you're using that as a major factor that our district is going to use in its numbers. In its numbers, you're going to use that, right, John? Or you don't use it?
Yeah, we need those emissions reductions are key for us to continue to progress towards these standards. Yes.
70%? 80%? Right. But so if it doesn't happen, and we know, I haven't done this for too long, only a few years, but I've been in the rural communities and I see those trucks and I see whose jobs they are. And by this January, all of our tier 3 and trucks and older, unless they have a special exemption for 1,000 miles, are gone. DMV will not issue the certificate or the sticker. What do? $50 million from ARB for trucks. The governor's budget seems to put more toward a diesel train. I think it's a diesel train, high speed. But not to benefit the people that if they had to buy an electric truck, if they had to, are we going to ensure them that they're going to be able to charge the truck up at the Grapevine and come home that night? Or are they going to have to park it somewhere, which they hope they don't, of running out on the freeway and just pulling off into the dirt road? But there's some questions that we don't see any answers, but I just see the political rhetoric of cleaning up this air, everything, versus what I've really seen, and which I give CARB a tremendous credit for. I give you credit for the farmer program. You did more than any other state or country has done with the air district. And those credits are what? They're real, aren't they? But you made sure that those tractors work. If we have problems with the deaf, if we have problems with the electronics, we're dealing with them. But we didn't hold the farmers hostage. We said, would you work with us on a voluntary program to see where we go? And we did. I really have concerns because I look at all the numbers and I see where you're going to give us credit for the smoke and all that. That ain't nowhere near what those trucks and what we're hoping to get credit for. Because if we don't, we're going to get sued. The district is. But the worst part of it is, in the report, doesn't show an economic impact to rural community families. What does it do to our families for jobs? And none of that is mentioned in here. And I know you've done an economic analysis when you come up with the rules that CARB comes up with. But everybody in this building has a job. Everybody in the 29-story EPA building, Cal EPA building, has jobs. But does my farmer worker or farmer or truck driver in Mendota have a job? Because he just got a letter from DMV, and I just got one. He brought it to me. His English is 50%, really good. He's been driving truck for 20 years. He came to me with a letter from DMV. We're not going to renew your truck license. And he's gone to 3 trucks, used trucks in the years. So I told him, I said, well, we have a problem and we know that, but don't give up. We're not going to sell you out the drain. We're not going to throw you into the river. But EPA, Cal EPA, ARB, need to figure out, what is this economic damage going to do? Because you haven't brought that up at all. I have not heard one board member of ARB give a hoot about Del Rey, Fireball, Mendota, where there are jobs. So I would hope that maybe you can mention to Michael or to even Mr. Cliff, Dr. Cliff, that you folks would at least look at that and address it, because it's a big chunk of our thing. And if you don't meet it by that, excuse me, you're going to come after us for more reductions. Thank you.
No, Manuel, thank you very much for your comments, and I will definitely make sure that I pass those on, especially on the infrastructure side, and then the impact, you know, as of small farm communities on some of these regulations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Manuel. And now I'll turn it over to Katrina to read out the Zoom commenters.
Okay, we have Thomas Menz online.
Hi, Thomas. You should be prompted to unmute.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Thomas Menz, and I've been a resident of the San Joaquin Valley for too many of these past 65 years. What leapt out at me in the emissions inventory is 5.5 tons a day. 5.5 tons a day. Seems of note that wintertime residential wood burning emissions, and it's winter emissions that are causing chronic failure to attain the federal standard. It's winter emissions, residential wood smoke is projected to remain constant at the single largest, filthiest source of directly emitted PM2.5 from stationary sources, with no plan to reduce that at 5.5 tons, 5.5 tons a day in the winter, right through 2031. It seems to me that non-essential residential wood burning really ought to be banned. And if you need a contingency measure, maybe you should actually enforce Rule 4901. It becomes quite tiresome to me to hear time and again that we already have the most stringent wood burning rule when the valley remains the dirtiest air basin in the country. So, of course, most stringent is the very least that we should be doing. 5.5 tons a day is 5.5 tons too much. It's like 27 times as much as the PM2.5 as wildfire smoke contributes, for instance. And this is a source that we really could control. Nighttime enforcement, when most of the burning takes place here, is nearly non-existent. You have these expensive low-lux cameras, or at least one of them that you've purchased, and you need to regularly schedule staff time to actually use them. And I think it's quite a mistake not to use the infrared cameras to detect wood smoke emissions. It's no evasion of privacy to document smoke being emitted from somebody's chimney into the nighttime air using infrared technology. It's specious to compare the use of infrared technology to detect marijuana growing occurring inside someone's home to detecting it outside being emitted. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Please ban all non-essential residential wood burning. And as a contingency measure, actually assign the staff time, the staff hours to actually enforce the rule. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas, for those comments. This is John Klassen. I just wanted to note that where we are in the process now with the planning for this new revised attainment plan. What we're presenting here is just our analysis of BACM, really, that we're meeting those BACM requirements. What we'll be doing in future workshops as we go down the path with this plan is looking at these different rules to see what can we do further to get more emissions reductions, to put together a strategy to get those needed reductions to get us to attainment of the standard. So, and that could include looking at Rule 4901 for potential changes to make it more stringent. So that'll be forthcoming in future analysis and upcoming workshops. So encourage you to stay involved in that.
Okay, next up we have Janet Dietz-Kamay.
Thank you. I feel like, and I'm frustrated by feeling like I'm a broken record. I talk representing the people who are suffering from this air. I moved here in 2003. I did not have asthma. 3 years after being here, I had my first asthma attack. And I'm not the only one. There are thousands of us here who have asthma and other respiratory diseases, and have health problems that are related to breathing this air that are still undiagnosed because they affect the heart and other parts of the body. The particulates, PM2.5, get into the bloodstream and take their toll on all of us. 35 micrograms per cubic meter is way too high for me. If PM 2.5 is at that level, I am wearing an N95 mask. And there have been many occasions this summer when I have had to wear an N95 mask. You could kind of say, and I will repeat my name, Janet Dietz-Kamay. You could kind of say I'm a breathing specialist. You could also say I'm the canary in the mine. My reaction to this air is a red flag. Because at least I register what this air is doing to me. Unfortunately, Manuel Cunha had a coughing episode while speaking. I have a lot of that if I'm out in the air and the micrograms are too high for me. I start with that. I start coughing and retching if the micrograms are too high, PM 2.5. And many of the residents here struggle to breathe. My concern is the poor children who are growing up in this valley air. Children who are being adversely affected as far as their physical development by breathing this air. It is not cheap having asthma. I just had to buy MERV 13 HVAC filters, costing me $110. And that hopefully will last until the end of this year. But if the inversion months raise the PM 2.5 to a high level, then I'm going to have to change out those filters frequently. This is the 5th largest city in California, and the population is expanding. The house building is, I live down near Kings Canyon and Temperance. Temperance, Armstrong, Fowler. The house building is further and further south. It's now down to Belmont. And there are people moving in. Our population is growing, and there are more people who are going to be adversely affected by this air. Now, we were talking costs. There was a part of the slideshow addressing costs. But I never hear any costs for those of us who are adversely affected by this air and have the cost of HVAC filters, MERV level 13 and above, the filters for air purifiers in the house, and in my case, in the cars, for medical visits, for medications, for those who don't have the advantages I have, for the hospital visits. There is nothing indicated as far as the costs of people who are sickened by living here. I think in fairness, that should be included because that's a lot of money when you look at it over the population. Wildfires are part of our life now. Climate change, Canada burning up, countries in Europe, wildfires that they've never had. Wildfires are part of life now because of climate change. And they are what are, they affect us, all of us. The wildfires affect all of us. All of those of us who are breathing this air. This year hasn't been as bad as it was, I think it was 2 years ago. But we have been affected by wildfires north and south of us. I support the comments made by Thomas Mintz. We have been asking for a wood burning ban, especially during inversion months, for years. We put a lot of time into the PM 2.5 plan, many hours, many meetings. And we have consistently said that for those of us who do not depend upon residential burning as a source of heat, it should not be that people are using fireplaces and contributing to PM 2.5 during the inversion months. That is a quick fix. And those of us who support the wood burning ban all say the same thing. That is a quick fix, and it doesn't cost anything. So I will continue to be a broken record. I will continue to point out that people suffer from breathing in this valley. I will continue to point out that not everyone is as lucky as I am to be able to stay in a house that is safe. And I have monitors in my house to assure me that my air is clear, is safe to breathe. But there are a lot of people who don't have the advantages I have. And my heart goes out to them because they are the ones the most impacted by this air. I appreciate the mention of the many sources of PM 2.5 included in the slideshow. But there are a lot of us who are depending upon you to help us. Help us. Help us so we can live life like we'd like to, going out and enjoying being outside. Help us. Help us so we don't end up in the doctor's office and don't end up in emergency rooms. And children can develop as they should without being interfered with by air that is unsafe for them to breathe. Help us. Because we are depending upon you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. We appreciate your comments. And I just want to note, I think it was noted on the slide as well, that the district and CARB, as part of this plan development process, will be conducting a health benefit analysis through BenMap, which will be quantifying the amount of hospital visits that were avoided from the plan strategy, respiratory attacks that were avoided, and other quantitative topics. And then we'll also be quantifying the monetary impact of that as well. So we hear your comments. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Next up, we have Jean-Pierre Cataviella.
Thank you. JP Cataviella here with Dairy Cares. I just want to, on behalf of the California dairy community, thank the Air District and the California Air Resources Board for the diligent work that was done on evaluating the precursors, particularly ammonia. There's a lot of rhetoric about ammonia that we hear in some of these public policy discussions, but it's just absolutely critical to have a clear understanding of what type of reductions are feasible and what impact reductions would have on overall air quality. Our industry is right now investing, and the state with us, investing many millions of dollars in improvements in reductions for climate emissions, water quality improvements, and other things. And it's very important for us to focus on strategies that will actually result in real improvements, and to not be focused on things that won't work or are not based on science. Ammonia is a very important discussion in this state, and applying the best science to it by both your agencies has helped really clarify what the issues are, what already has been accomplished in terms of very large reductions through regulations by the Air District, and what is feasible and possible going forward. So we appreciate the efforts of the staff in both agencies to shine a light on these issues and to give us a good, clear, science-based information to inform the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Laura Rosenberger Hader.
Oh, yes, I had a question. Your map showed high PM 2.5 in southern San Joaquin Valley. What city is that red spot in? Is it near the railroads or is it near the oil fields? And a next part of my question is, well, there's a lot of bad emissions coming out of the oil and gas industry. University of Pittsburgh did a study, it just came out, that showed an increased rate of asthma and lymphoma in children living near oil wells. And there's a lot of toxic metals, I guess, that contributed to it. But and I don't think economic feasibility is a good excuse not to regulate the oil industry. Because so many people will lose so many days of work from being sick and with severe allergies and things, and having cognitive impairments. And so the question was, where are those spots on the map? Can I see what cities they're actually in, where there was a PM 2.5 was high? There was no cities listed on the map, but I couldn't quite make it out. I'm still looking for the map. All right, thanks.
Yeah, Laura, this is John Klassen to answer your question on the map and where that highest concentration area was. That's in the Bakersfield area. It wasn't detailed enough on the map to see that, but Traditionally, our highest particulate matter concentrations are in Bakersfield. So that's that area that you saw on the map. And as far as the studies that you're referencing, if you have a chance to send those over, we'd be happy to look through those. You can use the contact information on our slides to send over any information you want us to consider as we continue to develop this plan.
And I've also
Thank you for those
noticed
comments.
the oil and gas industry emits 1.6 tons of PM 2.5 per day. And I think oil and gas production, and that's a lot of PM 2.5. And know they open more oil wells, maybe just because there's 3 times as much oil wells right now as there were last year. But wonder what this year's emissions would be compared to 2022.
Okay, thank you, Laura. We'll be looking at that through the development of this plan.
Thanks. Thank you.
There's no further indication of online comments.
Okay, and with that, I do not see any public comments through our webcast@valleyair.org email, and no additional indication of public comment on Zoom. So with that, we will go ahead and conclude the presentation and the workshop. If you'd like to submit public comments, Molly Boyette's contact information is on the slide, and CARB also included their contact information in the presentation. So feel free to reach out and submit your public comments via email. Thank you.